It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, August 30th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is welcoming special guest Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders to check in on the Isles for a Metro Division rival crossover.
Good to be here.
We'll have all that and more on today's Locked On Flyers.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there. Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on the app formerly known as Twitter at @rmiriam. We as a show are on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky at Locked On Flyers as well. You can subscribe or follow us for free over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you'll get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As you can see, there's a different face next to me. If you are watching the show on YouTube, that is Gil Martin from Locked On Isles. So happy to have you here, Gil.
Good to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, if you don't know otherwise, Gil and I co-host the Friday show of Locked On NHL. So check that out each and every Friday on the Locked On NHL feed.
Always fun to do that, and nice to do this. A little change of pace.
Yep. We'll get into it. I want to start with, what's been going on with the Islanders this offseason. First off, what was the sentiment at the end of last season in Islanders fandom? How was everybody feeling heading into the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the sentiment was that this team kind of reached its peak 2 years ago when they went to 7 games in the conference finals with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Lost game 7, 1-0. And since then, they've more or less brought back the same cast of characters, but they, each year they get a year older. So there's a little bit of concern about the lack of draft picks 4 years in a row now that Lou Lamoriello has traded away his number 1 pick, the lack of top level prospects, and the number of players who are 30 or over on this team's roster that, maybe this group has peaked and is going to start to decline, and that I think is the big concern for the fan base right now.
Yeah, it was interesting because the one big splash move that was made last season was the Bo Horvat acquisition, and it just seemed to not really have a huge impact, and there was a lot to give up for him. So what do people feel about that now that we've had half a season with him and then time to kind of sit on it?
I think people are a little bit concerned about $8.5 million a year for a guy who in 30 games with the Islanders barely scored a point every other game. I think there was a concern, but you also have to remember that after 6 games with the Islanders, Matthew Barzal was injured. That's his big line mate. There was no real third line mate. Anders Lee was sort of the third guy on that line, but he and Bo Horvat, their styles are so similar. They both kind of do the same thing that they didn't work well together on the same line. They both sort of get in front of the goal and try to redirect and screen the goalie and get rebounds. And you can't have 2 of those guys on the same line with nobody to get them the puck. So I think having Matthew Barzal there for a full year, now having his family on Long Island, having him established on Long Island, more familiar with the system, the hope is that in his first full season with the team, I don't think he'll score as often as he did in Vancouver because the Canucks played a much more wide open offensive system than the Islanders do. But I think we'll see better than a point every other game performance out of Bo Horvat. And then you add what he theoretically could do on the power play. He can kill penalties. He's very good at faceoffs. The intangible things, the leadership he provides, it's not just about points, although for $8.5 million, it better be also about points.
Right. You mentioned that the team is going to look pretty similar to last year and the lack of draft picks. But Lou Lamoriello is also known for keeping things very secretive and making some late summer deals out of nowhere. Do you think that's on the horizon this year, or are we set?
It's possible, and I guess the one move that we still don't know about is Zach Parise. At Getaway Day, when the team was heading home for the summer, he basically said either he's going to play for the Islanders next year or he's going to retire. Well, here we are at the very end of August, and we still don't know what Zach Parise is going to do. It's entirely possible he's already signed a contract. The Islanders now are officially a little less than $500,000 over the cap. So announcing the Parise signing right now would probably be counterproductive. He would probably be signing for about $775,000, $800,000 a year, which is what he's played for the last 2 seasons. So he's really going to sign at or close to the minimum, but we're still waiting on a decision. I know that the team did make some signings, Julien Gauthier, for example. So if Parise doesn't come back, they're prepared. But I still think that Lou Lamoriello and the Islanders organization would welcome Parise back with open arms if he does decide to come back.
Yeah, my next question was going to be about that salary cap, because the Islanders are right up against it, as you said. So is there any plan in the works for some cap relief, especially given what the UFA situation is going to be, coming up in this season, right?
Yeah, I mean, just to get under the cap, the almost $500,000 they need, there's a couple of ways they could do it. I think the easiest one would be to send Ross Johnston down to Bridgeport. Somehow he has a salary of $1.1 million for a guy who played, I think, 18 games last year and had 2 assists. So if they send him down, even if Parise signs, they're kind of, right at the cap. Obviously, if any injuries take place, that affects the, cap as well. But as of right now, I think that's the quickest way, other than making a trade before the season starts, to get under that cap and start the season that way.
So, you mentioned maybe having some younger guys with lower salaries joining the lineup, given the fact that the Islanders haven't had first round draft picks in forever, like you mentioned. What's the prospect pool looking like? And do you really have a strong, system of guys that could move up?
Well, there's a couple of guys who they're looking at. I don't necessarily think there's anyone ready to step in this year. There's a few guys they'll take a look at forward. I think you're talking about William Dufour, who played 1 game with the team last year. Matthew Maggio, who, was the MVP of the OHL last year, but probably is still a year away from full-time duty. And then you have Ruslan Iskakov, who is only about 5'8", 5'9", 165 pounds, but has very good hands. He'll get a long look at training camp. I think all 3 of them will probably at least be called up when injuries hit, or if they play well in the AHL, they'll get their cups of coffee this year. And maybe next year, when guys like Cal Clutterbuck and Matt Martin's contracts are up, they'll have more of an opportunity to be everyday players.
Yeah, I just I look at the Islanders and I just think like stagnation is the word that comes to mind. But do you think there'll be any shakeup in the lineup overall, like in the top 6 even?
No, I mean, the only difference would be we don't know about Oliver Wahlstrom. He missed the last 2/3 of the season last year, roughly, with an injury. He's back. They hope he could be a 20 to 25 goal scorer. He's a guy who could fit in anywhere from the first to the third line. So we're not sure exactly where he's going to fit into the lineup, but he's sort of the wild card as far as getting a little more offensive production and sort of shaking up the line combinations a little bit.
Yeah. So I think, if I am on the outside looking in here a little bit, you have to feel like, management could be in the hot seat. Like, is that the case?
If they miss the playoffs, I think that, that may start to be the case. The management, the ownership really does trust Lou Lamoriello. And, they've made the playoffs 4 out of the last 5 years. They have won a playoff series in 3 of those years. I mean, compared to where they were before Lou Lamoriello came in, this is better and more consistent than they've been in a while. And, twice reaching the Eastern Conference Final. Fans may not like it. A lot of the fans are a little bit concerned about the future, the way he's handled the cap and the age of the team
Right.
and trading away the picks and the prospects. So they're more concerned, I think, than ownership. Ownership seems to be backing the 81-year-old Lou Lamoriello fully at this point.
So, like, what is your gut feeling heading into this season about the team?
I think we're looking at another year where they're somewhere between 7th and 10th in the conference, battling for one of those wild card spots. Best case scenario, maybe they could finish third in the Metropolitan, but I think that's a long shot, and it would require a lot of those questions surrounding this team to be answered in a very positive way.
All right. Well, we'll switch gears and talk about the Flyers a little bit coming up next, and we'll get into those Metro Division predictions later in the show as well. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit fanduel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
So the Flyers, still, I would assume, in rebuilding mode. I guess the first question I have is about goaltending. What's happening with Carter Hart? What is his future with this team? And how do you see the goaltending looking when this season gets underway?
Yeah, that is the biggest question, I think, right now. And we've talked a lot about it on Locked On Flyers. Russ and I have. And we kind of go around in circles because until we get this report from the NHL and Hockey Canada, we don't know what's happening with Carter Hart and his ability to play for the Flyers this upcoming season. There could be impending, suspension time here. So that would, throw things a little bit for a loop. But we do have 3 other active goaltenders here, which is also part of the issue, right? So we have Cal Peterson, which we acquired as part of the Ivan Provorov deal that was, a cap dump for the Kings. And then we also have Sam Ersson and we have Felix Sandstrom. And so, who is going to end up making the team, assuming Carter Hart is your #1 goaltender, but you can't really do that entirely. Then we have 3 guys that could potentially be part of the mix. There's also like somebody under contract in Lehigh Valley as well. So there's kind of a crunch here and we're not sure exactly where it'll come out in the wash. But I think, you just, all things being equal, Carter Hart is still considered the #1 goaltender, but he's also on an expiring contract this upcoming season, and we haven't heard anything about a potential contract extension yet. I think all of that is on hold until this report comes out.
Is there any timetable for the report that you know of, or?
They keep saying anytime now, and we figured it would be some sort of Friday late news dump. So every Friday, I keep checking the wires,
Talk to me a little bit about some of the injured players. I mean, Sean Couturier, certainly dealing with a lot. Cam Atkinson, any of these guys going to be ready for the season? And what's the situation looking like with them?
Yeah, we talked about this on the show last week. If you haven't listened to it, go back. We did a how to get Cam Atkinson and Sean Couturier back in the lineup episode. And, both of them haven't played for over a year, really. And so it's just a matter of figuring out what kind of game shape they're in, how those surgeries and injuries have affected them. And really being delicate about it at training camp and getting them back up to speed and using the preseason effectively to figure out how, they might slot in the lineup. If it were up to Russ and I, we would, slowly get them back into the lineup and maybe put Couturier at 2C instead of 1C to start off with, just to manage the minutes and the competition. And then maybe put Atkinson on third line wing.
Obviously, this team is in a rebuilding mode right now. How does John Tortorella, who is not known as a coach for younger players who are trying to, rebuild the franchise, how is he going to handle that situation? And do you think he'll survive the season?
I absolutely do. I think that with Tortorella, there's a really good working relationship between him and Danny Briere. So if he were to decide that this rebuild just isn't for him, they would make that decision in the offseason next summer, 100%. And it would be like a mutual decision. Tortorella is going to retire sort of way. I think that's the only way that he would leave. I do think that Tortorella has had time to adjust to what this is, obviously, since Chuck Fletcher was fired. And like I said, he and Danny Briere have spent a lot of time working together. They sat in the press box together at the tail end of the last season, letting the assistant coaches manage the bench. So I really think Tortorella knows what's up right now, and he's going to do his best to try and have a successful year one of a rebuild team and whatever comes with that, and then just kind of go from there and see where we are a year from now.
Do you think he will change his approach to the way he coaches in game at all?
No, not at all. I don't think he's capable of changing at this point.
Torts is going to do torts.
Yep.
When you have a team in rebuild, obviously young players become important. Who are some of the young players that you expect to see coming into this lineup this year and contributing to the Flyers' next stage of this rebuild?
Yeah, I think, one of the guys that really stood out last season, who I think will take a step forward and contribute even more, is Noah Cates. He's just a real solid two-way forward. And I think this season they'll be looking for him to increase scoring. I think it was just getting used to the NHL game this past season was the main remit, but now he's on tap to take a step forward. Owen Tippett is another young guy who's played very well and looks to be a huge part of this team moving forward beyond the rebuild. And then I think, the next group of guys, I think Tyson Forster has a shot to make the team full time this year. He came up for the maybe last third of the season last year. I expect him to make the lineup going into the season, but they did sign Ryan Poehling and Garnet Hathaway to fill out the fourth line. So beyond that, I'm not sure that there's anybody else that'll make the team on the forward side up front. I think that, you'd have to maybe look at the defensemen for more younger guys to make the cut. Obviously with Ivan Provorov gone, we'll have to look at some of the other guys on the list, and maybe Igor Zamula, maybe a Ronnie Attard can make the team, but Cam York is going to be a huge part of the blue line moving forward as well.
And how do you feel about the blue line with the changes that were made this offseason? Do you think they'll be better this year, and why or why not?
I think it's a big question mark for me because I'm not really sure what Mark Stahl looks like these days. I mean, I know what his skill set is, but in terms of, another year, like he's another year older, like what will his speed be like? Not sure. And we also acquired Walker from the Kings in the Provorov deal. And so he'll be out there. Not sure where he's going to slot into the lineup. Russ and I think he'll be on that top pairing with Cam York, or if they consider that the second pairing and Sanheim Ristolainen will be that top pairing. Not sure how that's going to play out in camp either in terms of the minutes. But I think there could be any number of combinations here. And I think it'll just be a matter of who works best together moving forward.
Should be interesting to see, and going to be a very interesting season for the Flyers coming up this year.
Absolutely. I think, this is a year where in year one of a rebuild, it's kind of a get out of jail free card, and they're going to be allowed to make a lot of mistakes. They're going to be allowed to try different things out. I'm looking forward to, as the season progresses, maybe some of the younger guys getting call-ups just to see what they can do. So in some ways, this is going to be a lot of fun. It'll kind of be like a playground of different guys coming in and out, and winning it will be, I think, important to Torts, but not really important in the grand scheme of things.
Well, I know you and Russell have this covered all season long, so looking forward to hearing and seeing what you guys have to say.
Well, we are actually really looking forward to it as well. There are a lot of implications for what both teams are up to in the division, and we will get to that coming up next. Gil, before we dig into divisional predictions, both of our teams are involved in the big outdoor game weekend stadium series. That is a first for the NHL. They're going to have 2 games back to back on President's Weekend at MetLife Stadium in North Jersey. So one of the games will be the Flyers versus the Devils. The other game is Isles versus Rangers. So we actually talked about it on Monday's show, what we're thinking as far as what it means for the Flyers. But what does it mean for the Islanders?
Well, anytime you play in the Rangers in a big event game, that adds a little juice to it. Unfortunately, technically, it's an Islanders home game, which
Oh, really?
I think the Rangers cannot contractually play a home game outside of Madison Square Garden, so it's designated as an Islanders home game, and that's a little bit strange. But to me, it's a very good event. It's something I was at the game at Yankee Stadium. It's been about 10 years already, I think, almost since that game. But it should be a very big event. And look, anytime you have the Islanders and the Rangers getting together, there's a little extra juice to a game like that, a little extra bad blood. And to do that in front of, a crowd as big as the crowd we anticipate at the Meadowlands only adds to the event. So I'm looking forward to it. And considering that the Islanders and the Rangers have not met in the playoffs since 1994, anything that'll add a little more juice to the rivalry to me is a good thing.
Yeah, given where the 2 teams have been the last several years, it's felt to me like that rivalry has died down a little bit, and maybe this will make it, perk back up a bit.
Put a little more wood into the fire. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How about the Flyers and the Devils?
I think it's very frustrating because, as I have said, I do not enjoy the New Jersey Devils, and that's probably something we can both agree on here. And especially that they've gotten good again is a little upsetting. So I'm hoping that the Flyers can, pull off a good upset here in the outdoor game.
Should be good, and it's sort of the battle of North Jersey versus South Jersey in a lot of ways. So
Yeah. Especially because the Flyers practice facility is in South Jersey as well. But as far as the division overall, I think there's like 2 different battles going on here. It's like who's going to be the best and then who's going to be the worst. And I'm not sure which is going to be more fun to look at in the grand scheme of things. But I think you really have like the Devils and Canes up top in the Metro, right?
Yeah, those would be the top 2 teams. And I mean, the Canes are probably getting toward the end of this group's chances to take that last step and get to the Stanley Cup final, while the Devils are, in my mind, still on the upswing and haven't really reached their full potential. And this year may very well be where those 2 teams sort of cross paths or intersect. But I think those are your top 2 teams in the division, and it probably, just like last year, will go down to the wire as to who's going to win it.
Yeah, I'm especially interested to see who gets that 3rd playoff spot in this division, because I think, it could be one of several teams. I think the Rangers are definitely a part of that competition. I think the Pens, with what they've done this offseason, have made a case that they can maybe sneak in to that 3rd spot. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the Rangers, the Penguins, the Islanders, there's a lot of unknowns with those 3 teams. And, once you get past that big 2, I think you're talking about 3 or maybe 4 teams that'll probably be fighting for 3rd place and wild card spots in, the division and then in the conference. And, maybe there's 4 teams, depending on how much better Columbus gets and whether Washington can bounce back. It's going to be interesting to see who tries to claim those last 2 playoff spots, maybe 3 in the conference and the division.
Yeah, I think those wild card spots are gonna live up to their name, especially with I think a little more chaos in the Atlantic this year will add to it. But I do think it's possible that Metro teams get both of those wild card spots.
Wouldn't mind that at all.
Because that would give the Islanders a fighting chance.
That's correct.
Yeah, I do think the Islanders have a shot at one of those wild card spots. I don't think they'll make it into the top 3 for sure, but I do think that the wild card is going to be pretty open. I see the Caps and the Isles really battling for at least one of those spots, right?
I think that's very possible. Look, to me, Ilya Sorokin is the key. If he stays healthy and starts 50 to 55 games, they should be in all but let's say 4 or 5 of those games, because he has been extremely consistent and he keeps you in. He's not going to win all of them, but he keeps you in almost all the games that he starts. He was second in the Vezina voting for a reason last year. He's 27 going on 28. He's right in the prime of his career. And the Islanders play a defense-first style of hockey. So to me, they're going to have to win a lot of 2-1 and 3-2 games to get there. But I think they've got the goaltending and the team defense to play that style. And then the question is, can the power play get a little better? Can the offense, can a guy like Oliver Wahlstrom be better? Can a guy like Bo Horvat be more productive? Can Matthew Barzal stay healthy? If they can accomplish, 2 out of those 3 things, they'll probably be a little bit better than they were last year and have a good shot at making the playoffs.
Yeah, I think so too. Do you think that any Metro team has a shot at the Stanley Cup?
I think New Jersey and Carolina do for sure. I think if Igor Shesterkin gets really hot at the right time, I think the Rangers are capable of a long playoff run. But to me, the 2 teams that have the best Stanley Cup shot would be Carolina and New Jersey. Maybe still a year away for New Jersey, but I think they learned a lot last year.
Yeah, I just wonder how much further they can progress with the experience that they've gotten, and is it enough to take them to that next level yet? I'm not sure either, but I think as far as veteran presence and experience, Carolina still has an advantage there. But it's hockey; anything can happen. So I guess we'll see. To wrap up the show, we do have that summer poll still going on the Flyers end of things. Which game are you most looking forward to this season on the schedule? The link to vote in that poll will be in the show notes, so make sure you do that. That will do it for today's show. Thanks once again for Gil joining us today. Gil, where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Ice Wars NYR versus NYI. And of course, you can find the show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
All right. As a reminder, we Unlocked On Flyers always want to hear from you. So send in your mailbag questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com, or you can comment over on YouTube. I am Rachel. I'm on the app formerly known as Twitter at RMiriam. That's RMIRIAM. Have a great day, everyone.